Right, so welcome everyone. My name is Geneva Blackmer, and I am the Program Director for the Interfaith Center at the Miami University campus in Oxford, Ohio. We are a safe, welcoming interfaith space, inviting our local and global communities to engage in dialogue, education, and service. The Interfaith Center's mission is to invite people from diverse secular, spiritual, and religious traditions to participate in each other's practices and engage in interreligious dialogue in order to cultivate appreciative understanding and build relationships. We seek to unify people of all faiths and no faith around common moral, social, and ethical concerns in order to build a more just and equitable society. This program is part of an ongoing series called the Divergent Immigrant Experiences, which was founded by our student liaison, Priyana Kalita. This panel is one of many initiatives which create space to raise immigrant voices from a multitude of religious, spiritual, and secular backgrounds to shine light on the diversity and complexity of their experiences. It is funded in part by a We Are Each Other's Racial Equity Grant from Interfaith Youth Corps, which aims to equip young people to engage in acts of interfaith cooperation, anti-racism, and service with their communities. And Priyana is actually one of our panelists this afternoon and will provide a little more insight later into their motivations for developing this web series and the way it fits into their personal journey. But first, I am going to turn it over to you, Dom.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Geneva. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I am on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. This acknowledgement is a personal commitment to and deep appreciation for the land that I am in relationship with. Really quick for anyone at home that might not be aware, land acknowledgements are a way to respect the ancestors who cared for our land and that is continuing to care for us now. It's also a reminder of the discriminatory, racist, and colonial practices that continue to create barriers for Indigenous peoples and communities. I once heard Brene Brown say to Laverne Cox that if you don't own the story, and if you don't own the story owns you. And I think that's a really great thing to think about when we are looking at the truth of our history. So may we come together, encourage empathy and respect, and reconnect to the deep wisdom of our ancestors, the whispers of the plants and the medicine of our lands. So I'd also like to mention that I am in deep gratitude for this conversation that is about to take place here today. It's an honor to witness the coming together of such diverse lived experiences for such important discussion. And to the rest of it. So thank you, Priyana. Thank you so much for organizing this, and Geneva, once again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this wonderful panel. And to the rest of the panelists, I so appreciate you sharing your willingness to share your wisdom with the rest of us. So I'm entering this panel with an open heart and an open mind, and I encourage everyone at home to do the same here today. And a reminder to everyone that the speakers are donating their time to be here with you today. So if you're able, just like turn off any distractions and give them your undivided, wholehearted attention. Many thanks, and over to you, I believe, Philippe.
Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everyone. My name is Felipe Zarita. I am right now talking to you from Santiago, Chile. I usually live in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am here wearing my URI hat. For people that don't know about URI, URI stands for United Religions Initiative, which is a global grassroots interfaith network that cultivates peace and justice by engaging people to bridge religious and cultural differences and work together for the good of their communities and the world. I'm very, very excited to be able to represent URI as the vice chair of the North American Leadership Council, and to welcome you all to be here to enjoy this conversation about immigration justice and how important that is in not only our history here in the US, but in the world in general, especially when we think about how we are all one family, right? We're all humans and we all are part of the same thing. And sometimes we feel like maybe frontiers and borders divide us, when in reality we should realize that we're all just one. And so with that, I would like to bring to you to remembrance the Golden Rule, a principle that unites us all in different religions, different civilizations throughout time. Treat others as you want to be treated. And in this case, I want to bring to you, the thought of how do we treat immigrants with the Golden Rule? How do we treat the refugee crisis around the world if we see it through the lens of the Golden Rule? Treat others as you want to be treated. Hopefully, I would think that all of us want to be treated well. We want to be treated with respect, with dignity, with love, with appreciation, and more than anything, with welcoming arms in wherever we are. And so if we are true believers of whatever religion we might subscribe to, or spirituality, dogma or doctrine that you feel like you follow, think about the Golden Rule, which is something that we all believe. And so how can that unite us in this topic? So as an immigrant from Chile, I feel especially identified with this panel, and especially touched and thankful that all of these wonderful people are here to inspire us in different ways. So thanks for the opportunity. And once again, URI, very, very happy to be behind all this as well.
Thank you so much to both of you. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank both of our co-sponsors, Start the Wave and URI North America, who have truly set a new precedent for how storytelling can be used in social justice and have empowered so many people around the world to have the courage to share their stories. The immigrant community has always faced ongoing injustice and xenophobia, but this was really exacerbated in the past year during the pandemic and throughout the duration of the previous administration. As we look to collectively build a brighter future, we must be intentional in recognizing the immigrant community in the interfaith movement's call for racial equity and justice. Today, we will hear for 5 unique stories from our panelists that we hope will provide you a window into their experiences and serve as a mirror for common humanity. So our first panelist, as I said, is Priyana Kalita, whose pronouns are she and they. And Priyana is really the brains behind the Divergent Immigrant Experiences initiative, and really why we're all gathered here today. Priyana is a student athlete from India who plays women's tennis for Miami University. Priyana is double majoring in sport leadership and management with a concentration in coaching and women, gender, and sexuality studies. She was inducted in the Theta Alpha Kappa National Society for Religion and Theology Studies for her work with the trans community and sex work in India last year. When researching the topic, she got to learn a lot of things related to Buddhism and Hinduism specifically, which cultivated a desire to learn more about various other religions and religious practices. She hopes that the work that she's doing with the Interfaith Center will allow her to learn about real experiences of people from various religions and faith traditions from all over the world. And Priyana is our past intern and current student liaison. So Priyana, I am going to hand it over to you.
For sure. Thank you for the introduction. Makes me sound really good, but regardless, thank you to everyone for being here and agreeing to do this. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules and everything. I'm going to introduce myself in my native language of Assamese. মোৰ নাম Priyana Kalita. মই Miami University চতুৰ্থ বছৰীয়া ছাত্ৰী। The Divergent Immigrant Experiences web series or Protistata. I just introduced myself in my native language, and I miss where I come from, because I haven't visited my home in almost 1.5 years now. So my university is located in the homelands of the Miami and Shawnee tribes. Land acknowledgement, I feel like it's just something we should remember that where we exist. So I'm going to talk about time today, how we are taught that time cannot be controlled, how we cannot beat time. But as an immigrant, I would like to disagree with that. I immigrated to this country in the fall of 2017. My family had to pay around 27,000 rupees, which is around $350 for the F1 student visa that I am on currently. when I got the visa, I got 5 years to make the most out of my time in the US. 5 years, yes. So my primary purpose of coming here was to get an athletic scholarship and then come to the US. This was because I come from a middle working class family in India, and affording education or sports for my family in India itself was not possible. So I just wanted to, get out of there and, make my family free of all that stress of expense and everything. So one of the things that I'm always under stress is about the visa, the ticking time clock that is on my back. The 5 years ticking time clock is on my back every day. I have to think about what am I going to do next after graduating in May, because I'm a senior right now. So that was the same feeling before I immigrated. Before I immigrated to this country, I had to get a better ranking, better results in tennis, and my family couldn't afford to send me to tournaments or better coaching from my hometown of Guwahati in the state of Assam. So at the age of 16, I moved out of my house. I moved out of my hometown to the capital city of New Delhi for better tennis coaching, or to afford a hope of getting a better life in the United States of America, right? So I moved to New Delhi, and I started living alone because my family couldn't afford to move with me. And then I started working at the academy as practice partner to practice more without any cost, and also earn a bit so that I could pay off my coaching fees. Around 15 or 16 years old, I learned the value of hard work and actually earning money to pay, like the happiness after a day of hard work, around 15 or 16. So I have a lot of respect for working people. Yeah, a lot. And so remember, I'm here on a 5-year time clock. And although we are taught that time doesn't wait for anyone, or we cannot control time, my time is controlled by the people in the government of the United States of America. My time is controlled by the people in power, by the people who have privilege. They can stop or even end the time clock with policies right during this moment, right during the moment I'm speaking right now. One such policy, as Geneva was talking about, was, it came out during the month of July 2020 last year, was that the former administration came out with this policy of international students needing to leave the country within 10 days if their classes were to go online during this ongoing pandemic. They did give us options to not leave. The option was to transfer to an in-person, in-person operating college, in-person classes, operating college. That was before a month of our classes were to start, like fall 2020 was about to start. If we did not leave the country and our classes went online, then deportation could be a result of that. I was affected by it. Millions of people like myself were affected by it. So many of my close friends were affected by it. I don't remember sleeping for almost a week during that period of time. And mind it, that this is going on during a global pandemic. Okay, so some of the other policies which came in during the pandemic was that the dealing and denial of work visas. The work visas got delayed until this month, March of 2020, by the former administration. Not sure what is going to be the status of it after this. The delaying of refugee status for asylum seekers who come to the United States for hope and safety, denying and delaying of it. Some of the incidences which took place was the horrible incident of non-consensual hysterectomies, which were performed at the Irwin County ICE Detention Center in Georgia. The recent rise of Asian hate crimes, with the latest one taking place in New York City. So the American citizenship is a privilege. Being a permanent citizen of this country, of the United States of America, is a privilege. If one isn't a citizen, and wants to come here temporarily on an authorization, then you are handed a ticking time clock on your hand, and you're asked to make the most of it during 4 or 5 years. And that time clock can be manipulated, can be beaten, can be stopped, can be broken by the people in power, by the institutions in power. So as I said, my time as an immigrant is controlled by the people in power of this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priyana. So our next speaker is Rico Ocampo, who was born in Mexico and immigrated to the United States in 1992. He is an undocumented, documented community organizer and activist. He has engaged in local, statewide, and national advocacy efforts to advance systemic change for homeless youth, immigrant communities, and underrepresented youth color. He currently serves as the director of the Anytown Las Vegas, the longest running anti-racist youth program in the state of Nevada. In addition, Rico also serves as the youth organizer for Make the Road Nevada, a nonprofit organization that works with Latinx and working class communities of color through policy, innovation, and transformative education. So Rico, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Geneva. First, I would like to acknowledge and honor the indigenous communities of this region and recognize that I am situated on the traditional homelands of the Nawovi Southern Paiute people. I offer gratitude for the land itself, for those who have stewarded it for generations, and for the land to be returned. I'm going to let you all in through a story, my story. My work is rooted in audacious youth empowerment and community organizing. And my family and friends, they know me as Rico. And you can call me Rico. But before I share the work that I do, I need to share my story with you. I must share my story with you because it is the only way for you to truly understand who I am. In 1992, my mother and father demonstrated the greatest act of love. They left their home country and traveled thousands of miles across Mexico for a more dignified life. My parents' journey to the United States is full of breakthroughs. My parents' journey to the United States is full of breakdowns. My parents' journey to the United States is full of unstoppable moments and non-negotiable moments. Sweating with conviction, my parents made a decision to fight for their dignity, so they traveled thousands of miles, navigating mountainous terrains and carrying their children across the Tijuana River, all in the name of love. You see, my parents had to become world-class swimmers and long-distance runners, all in the same day. And as my mother approached the United States border, the only thing that was separating her from the US was a strip of highway. And I remember my mother telling me that her body was close to shutting down in that moment. I remember my mother telling me that her body was yelling for water. I remember my mother telling me that her sandals were hanging on by a thread. But I also remember my mother telling me that she took one look at her 3 babies, and that was it. Her fuel was love. So she crossed, and the rest was history. And fast forward a few years later, when I was 5 years old, I remember holding my mother's hand, sightseeing through the city of Las Vegas. And for any 5-year-old, you can imagine the awe that I was in as I saw the buildings and their height and the magnifying neon signs. When all of a sudden, a woman intentionally rushed between my mother and I, causing us to break apart. And the next word that was uttered through the mouth of that woman would change my life forever. It was at that moment that my soul heard the word illegal for the very first time. It was at that moment that my first name and last name were replaced with illegal. It was at that moment that I realized adults had the license to call 5-year-old children illegal with no ramifications. It was at that moment that my dreams, my body, and my existence could be considered illegal to people. And two things happened to me after that. One, I knew that I never wanted to feel like that again. And two, I wanted to be brave, but I couldn't. I wanted to protect my mother, but I couldn't. I wanted to be unafraid. And since then, the word illegal has been hurled at me hundreds of times, sometimes hitting me like daggers and boulders. But today, I am using the worst parts of my life as fuel for my conviction. I am using the worst parts of my life as my breakthrough, not my breakdown. So what do I stand for? I stand for people. I stand for immigrant communities. I stand for radical love. And historically, I've known that immigrant communities, my community, has been seen and treated in America as perpetually foreign and un-American. So how do I prove it? That's a good question. How about the pandemic relief that is being provided by the United States government right now? Even while undocumented families are suffering across America, they are single-handedly supporting the nation's infrastructure. They call us essential workers, yet we have deprived the same dignity, the same support, or pandemic relief as the rest of the country. You can't call us essential and deportable in the same breath. Undocumented immigrants make up more than half the agricultural workforce, half. Yet the US government refuses to provide permanent status to my people who have given their life, their labor, and loyalty to this country. You can't call us essential and deportable in the same breath. Undocumented immigrants pick the food that you eat. We process the meat that you grill. We stock the groceries that you buy, yet we are rarely afforded the same dignity, support, and pandemic relief as the rest of the country. You can't call us essential and deportable in the same breath anymore. And that is my story. My name is Rico Ocampo. I am undocumented. I am a community organizer. I am Anytown. But also, I think most importantly, now I am unafraid. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rico. Very powerful as always. Our next speaker is Dr. Sophia Khan. Dr. Sophia Khan is a community activist and the interfaith leader involved in numerous charity projects for over 15 years. She is founder of KC for Refugees, a non-faith-based community alliance helping locally resettled area refugees. Her nonprofit advocates for refugee resettlement and provides community education on refugee-related topics. Besides providing support, it also helps build bridges between these families and the community. Her work has been widely recognized across Greater Kansas City, and she has been a recipient of awards from the Crescent Peace Society, the Greater Kansas City Interfaith Council, the United Nations Association of Greater Kansas City, and the Rime Buddhist Center. So Dr. Khan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, and hello to everybody. I'm just very excited to hear everybody's stories, and maybe my story will bring us close together too. My story is a little bit different than yours. We talk about being a legal resident or undocumented, or whether or not you're a citizen or a student, and all the prejudices around that. But you have to recognize in this country, there are many, many levels and layers of prejudice and hate and bigotry that goes beyond even the legal title placed on you. You could be a citizen like me. You could be a legal resident like all the refugees that come into this country. But there is a group of people who support certain policies and make these government policies be created by them pushing their agenda and voting for the people who support their agenda and making the kind of policies that affect Rico and Priyana and everybody, because they have this kind of self-elected privilege. They feel that we are the only true Americans. Everybody else has something wrong with them. You know, we talk about white supremacy privileges. We have to take it back to that root. But trust me, I have thousands of white Americans who are part of my mission and help me. I'm not trying to be racist myself, but you know what I'm talking about. As a young woman, actually born to privilege, who was by her father, who decided because of his issues with how Pakistan was at that time, and he lost his oldest son to a road accident and blamed the medical system in Pakistan. And he had been traveling across the world and felt America was a better country, provided he thought more safety to his kids. And he made that big decision of bringing me as a teenager and my younger siblings to America, which we were never ready. We had a very fun life. It was my country. I was Sophia. People knew me as who I am. Suddenly I'm brought here and plugged into a system where I'm no more Sophia Khan. I am part of a group that they have collected together as the Muslims who are terrorists. And now I'm suddenly a terrorist trying to defend myself. And it was a very uncomfortable place to be. And then comes, on top of that, where everywhere I would go, people would say, where are you from? Who are you? And I had to defend that, hey, I'm as American as you are. I have to still defend that. It's a very uncomfortable place to be, but I didn't let that break me down. I am 53 years old now. I never let it break me down. I actually stood up and fought back and had these terms I would create every time how to respond when somebody asked me, where are you from? And one of my favorite one is, you don't look like a Native American. Where did your family bring you from? And that usually shuts down people right away. But in any case, part of my responding to how I felt when I came here as a minority and through the legal system and became a citizen was every day this fight of trying to prove that I am American. It was a very uncomfortable place to be. I made that my mission to never let that hold me back and always remember who I am, what I want to do with my life. And I have now 5 kids. They're, my girls are in 14 to 23 years old, raising them to be girls. They're all girls, raising them to be someone who's proud of who they are and standing up for what they believe in, and not just for themselves, but for everybody else. And in that, compassion, my profession, thank God, is part of that. I'm a practicing physician, but I also always wanted to reach out to minority communities and see what I could do in Kansas City area and in globally, whatever I could do, fundraising, encourage other people to support. And the story of Ahmed Al-Aboud, who started my passion for refugees, is very interesting. If you guys remember, then when the Syrian war started, a lot of this same group of people, the pushback was, don't let Syrians into our country because they are all terrorists. You don't want to have Syrians. So for the first 5 years of the war going on in Syria, America let in maybe 2,000 total refugees in a full, several year time period of the initial war. We were not letting those refugees come. And you're talking about Obama and that time when we think that the country was less racist, if you want to believe that. In that time period, in the last year of Obama's residency, he had decided to, because this thing was becoming in the media quite a bit, that, hey, you're talking about Turkey taking refugees or fighting against how Germany should treat the refugees or Canada. What are you doing about the refugee crisis? And they had no answer because they were not letting these people in America anyway. So he decided to bring 10,000 refugees to America. And Ahmed Al-Aboud and his family was the first family that came out of those 10,000 refugees that were already pre-screened and waiting for years to come to America. When this guy was ready to be accepted in the US, 27 refugee resettlement agencies refused to take him. Why? Because they thought there would be a backlash in the community because the community hates Syrians. And if my agency brings this family over, we're going to lose funding. We're going to have this backlash. People are going to call. They're going to hate us. I don't want to jeopardize my agency for this one family. So about 27 agencies had already refused this guy till the application hit the table of the agency in Kansas City. And as they were really happily ready to reject him, as a godsend, the person sitting next to them, who was a prior refugee himself, and if I go above my time, please cut me short, I will let me know. So he had called me up. He knew I used to pull support and bring community support for refugees even before I established my organization. He called me up, and I remember that call vividly. I was in the car, speakerphone goes on, kids are there, I'm carpooling, and he says, can you support this family? Promise me you can find financial support for this family for 1 year in case the community retaliates. And I don't want to let this guy with so many health problems and his 6 kids stay stuck in the refugee camp. And I said, sure, if my answer of yes brings the family out of a refugee camp and gives them a second chance to a normal life, who am I to say no? You know, my faith teaches me that believe in God if this is God meant to be from God. And I said, yes. You know, I said, I will collect the funds. Even if I have to pay out of pocket, I'll work a little extra. We will support this family. Bring it over. And lo and behold, when the family comes, the whole community gets excited. Everyone actually cheers for them, goes to the airport to visit them. And that started a phenomena of me realizing that actually there are not that many haters. There are more people who are kind and loving, like all of you on the panel, and who have people backing them. And with the support of that loving community, you know, I figured that it was time to create a community panel. And that's how my story 5 years ago started, of creating, which has been going strong, and more families came. We have 36 families, you know, because as this new administration, last administration came, they really shut down the refugee program. We were up to 36 families within the first year, and then it's been slowed down. We're hoping that more refugees will start coming. As President Biden said, you know, he'll bring in another 125,000. Last year, we brought in maybe 11,000 during the whole year. So it's been really bad, refugee resettlement. But, you know, here I am now fighting for these people, and don't care who asks me where I'm from, because I know how to answer them, and how I know how to stand up for these refugees and teach them never to get bothered by these questions, getting them ready. Hey, you're going to be asked this question, and this is how you respond. If somebody says you have an accent, say, duh, I'm multilingual. You can barely speak English, you know? So I just come up with these catchphrases, and I go strong, and I love these families. And I'm going to stop right here and let the next person go. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khan. I love that. So our next panelist is Esther Maria Clara Sparlos, who received her PhD from Miami University. She explores the intersections of immigration, schooling, and education. Having immigrated to the United States 17 years ago, her work centers around the experiences of youth who've immigrated from the northernmost countries of the Central American Isthmus, and the impact of immigration law, policy, and enforcement has had on them and their families. So Esther, I'm going to turn it over to you. And maybe that's not completely current, because I think you told me that you just relocated. So I apologize for that.
Not at all. No, thank you so much. Just a shout out to the beautiful family congregated here. The ties of kinship are strong, and I'm loving it. Things did change when I was first asked and honored with the request. I was currently in the US. I am currently back home in Honduras. I think that I just want to thank you all, because there's so much power, and there's so much that resonates right here with all the words and the stories that you've shared, because those are the stories of people that I've come to love profoundly, as well as my own story. There's something else. There's a lot of things they don't tell you about emigrating, right? Or there's a lot of things they don't tell you about making a home for yourself in a country that is not your own, by force, by choice, by a combination of both. And it is grief, loss, trauma. Many people are very familiar with the cycles of grief, right? I think I went over the last 17 some years, I went through all of it multiple times. It was multiple times in a day. Sometimes it was multiple times in a month. The physical impact on my body, on my spirit, on my mind, on my soul. It remains, you know, it's not broken, but there's a mark there, right? And it's for the betterment in different ways, because that experience gave me an understanding, a kinship with people that I had never met before, that all of a sudden we became siblings because of that frustration of running against the time, or feeling the pressure of language that is violent against our person and our existence and the people that we know are our own superheroes. People using words that they don't truly understand its impact, and how that offhanded comment of using words that are just primitive and fall flat and just uncomprehending of the complexities of the human experience is infuriating, it's exhausting, and yet we continue, because if we do not do so, they remain, right? So part of my process actually comes from my name, my father's surname, which is Claros. It's I'm an artist, I'm an educator, I'm a practitioner, I am a whole lot of different things in the service of the people that I love. And to that degree, there's a specific term in art, which is called chiaroscuro. In Spanish, it's claroscuro. So my first name, Claros, is part of that word. And it speaks to the contrast of light and dark, that which brings volume, like a three-dimensional experience, to the artwork. And in doing so, I'll bring up a couple of names of different scholars that I have come to find comfort and solace in, because as a mentor once said, if you find that that's out there, that which is published, doesn't speak to you, then it's your job to write it. So that there's a shared experience, that it's not just to write it, but to have these conversations where information is shared, minds and eyes are widened to something more, right? And so there's this theory, it's funds of knowledge, and there's light funds of knowledge and dark funds of knowledge. And oftentimes we talk about cultural assets and cultural attributes and the precious of heritage and inheritance, and parts of ourselves that have existed for centuries before, and that we are the embodied ambassadors to this. In everything that we do, in everything that we say, in how we carry on our world, all of us in this moment right now. But then there's also the darkness, right? The darkness that comes from trauma, the darkness that comes from the fear of not knowing if you're going to be able to pay your bills because of your legal status expiring, or you are in a relationship and all of a sudden you're going to have that conversation because you may have to leave, or the jobs you apply to, or the jobs that you aren't even eligible to apply for because of your legal status, your access to healthcare, your access to any sort of privilege, your access to travel, to see family, to reconnect, all of those things. And those are things that are often inherently forced into a very small container because of one's legal status or lack thereof. And it's funny because there's a fluidity to one's legal status that people don't often recognize, right? I have transitioned from multiple statuses over the years, and then all of a sudden it was all gone. That thin layer that I carried myself in that gave me access to a driver's license, or to be able to use my social security number for a job or anything else, gone. And I couldn't get it back. And so I found myself returning to the place that is and always will be solace, having to say goodbye to people that changed my life, who I adore, having to give up that time with them, miss out in seminal parts of our history, birthdays, moments of grief, moments of celebration, and pray to God that we can find ourselves one more day, from afar or up close. So I just, I want to thank you all for sharing your story, and that's mine.
Thank you so much. So our final panelist will be Kamani Sutra, who uses all pronouns with respect. They're a South Asian, Taluye, genderqueer, bearded drag artist from Washington, D.C., who transcends Western drag expectations by their performance repertoire and their aesthetic senses. So Kamani, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Geneva and Priyana, for hosting this amazing panel. And hi to everybody who is watching live on YouTube. Um, Let me just take a moment for appreciate the panel, everybody who has shared their wonderful stories and powerful stories. I could when I'm listening, I could definitely resonate to Priyana, like everybody else. Like as an immigrant, everybody's shared different experience, which I personally had. So it's like we are already a family, like without knowing each other, we are strangers, but we are still a family with all the similar experience, like a global family. And I would start up telling about my existence and the exhaustion that I go through because of my existence. I was a little boy born in like very South Indian family, very orthodox and like very typical homophobic family. And trigger warning and content warning to all the viewers if there is any emotional blackmailing and the death trigger warnings. My mom lost her first kid when she was 13 years old, and then that lead onto her to be very careful of the following kids. And I was always the kid who was mama's boy, taking care of her. And my dad was not financially stable, and I helped my mom working through it, working in a retail industries when I was like 10 years old, 12 years old. Um, and never used to hang out with any other people. I was not like a very typical guy who would smoke, who would drink, who would go around with friends. I was always listening to my mom and like checking all the boxes that I have to as a good boy, like a good son. And always been a family oriented person who would help. And like my mom and dad would be the rescue person, like a go-to rescue person with whatever happens in their whole sibling family. It's a huge family, joint family, 13 and 13 cousins. Um, and navigating those spaces, always being in there and not knowing what's going on in myself was a lot of exhaustion that went through. Like, oh, why I'm the only one here? Why is there's no representation in my whole family as a queer person? And I somehow like how Priyana was saying, my parents had to pay $250 to get just an admission. It's just an approval notice. You're not getting a visa, that you have to put $250 just for a hope of getting a visa. And it's not just for one university. You can't just apply for one university. You have to apply for multiple of them, like 4 of them, which means you're literally putting $1,000 out there for hoping of getting a visa. I was in those shoes. I made my waves to United States. And a boy who was born in Hyderabad and brought up and never went outside of Hyderabad, not even to within India, coming all the way to Western culture, it was hard for me to navigate. And given my accent, given my living day-to-day life, and navigating my queerness into the white spaces, although I had an queer experiences while I was in India, but it was hard for me to navigate here. And I found a home here. It's called South Asian LGBTQ Organization in Washington, D.C. It's like Push DC. And I have been organizing events there. I became a part of all this leadership, like committees and like advocacy works, and attended conferences, and I have made my chosen family. And that is something, best part of being queer is like you get to choose your own family, even though if your biological family is not there for you. And I like how example I'm saying, like here we are and we don't need to know each other. We know the similar experience. It's the same with the queer community. We go through the same process of coming out to everybody. And I came out to my parents 2-3 years ago, and it's not the end of the conversations. I still come out every single conversation that I have with them every day. Like I have to remember, oh, you remember that I came out? Oh, I am gay. I'm queer. It's like it's not existed at all. And me being a beard, and also I do art as a bearded drag artist, and I hold on to my authentic a lot. Like I wear saris, I wear lehengas, I wear tika, I wear flowers, I wear bangles, I wear jewelries, like holding on to my roots, because I have seen my mom doing that all the time in my time. Because whenever my mom does any kind of like a backyard work, or she's going to a fancy restaurant, she's going to a wedding, she always wears sari, and that inspires me, like how powerful she is and like how flexible she is. And that's how I hold on to my like my drag. And me doing against the norms of not women, like, oh, women cannot be having a beard, cannot have a body hair, like hairy hands. It's not true. When we look back, women are told to be like that. Women are told to be feminine, like so that you be very smooth and stuff. So for me, going against those norms is like so much exhausting. And even though I made like peace at myself, and I found my femininity in my body in my ways, and I have an amazing followers that who would support, but there's always people out there who want to see the end of my existence. I always live in this fantasy world, like, oh, I am doing amazing. I have like, oh, I have this amazing sari that I'm gonna wear. I'm gonna slay this. When I post it on Instagram, I get hate comments, and then I was like, oh wait, I'm just living in a fantasy world. Like these people, like I feel very sad, and like gives me so much like hope for them, that they are taught to be listen and like only think on these four walls at the whole box. They don't want to just think out of it. If you go on to the history, there's men who's wearing heels, men who's wearing dresses in Western culture also. And speaking of that, my own grandfather, he used to do stage acts. He's a performer. He used to do Ramayana, Bharata, and all he has to do is like Sita characters and woman characters. Oh, that's fine because he's married and having kids. If I do it because of I am queer and I'm not getting to a woman married, and then I'm not falling on under the privilege of heteronormative, and I do not exist. So it's the same thing. My mom is also like right now, it's hard for her, and I understand and I care about her. And because she's the mother of me, like I want to care. I don't want her to get hurt. But I can help because of the society be thinking like that. She's like, oh, if you want to do anything, you can do anything ever you want. Just get married once. We'll figure the things out. It's like, again, of the power of patriarchal, like as a born as a assigned male at birth, I could do anything because I'm a male, and I can get married to a woman and do whatever I want. So the existence of mine is very powerful. On the other hand, it's also so exhausting because there's a lot of hate around that. And yeah, I think that is it. The whole the introduction of myself, of talking about existence and the exhaustion of being existence in this society. When I'm breaking the rules and going against the norms of gender norms and like heteronormative society. Thank you so much, everybody, for giving this like space to talk.
Thank you so much, Kamani. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing all of your amazing stories and for just being so vulnerable with us in this space. Before we get into audience Q&A, I did just want to open it up to see if anyone who's on the call right now has any initial thoughts or reactions to what's been said or questions before we move forward. So I just want to make sure everyone's heard. No? Okay. Well, so I'm going to start with individual questions and then move into a group question. So the first question will be for Priyana. How do you find the energy to face this type of discrimination? What would you say to people who are living through those difficulties right now?
That is a Great question, actually. So when you're an immigrant or anyone associated with the process of immigration, you develop a fighter within you. Like you don't know about it, but you develop a little fighter in you, which is positive in ways, but negative in a lot of ways because you're constantly fighting. You're just constantly fighting. Sometimes you're fighting within yourself, with yourself. So probably just that spirit of, you've like I tell myself that you have made it from Northeast India, which when I went back home in 2019 was under curfew, was without we had no network, it was military curfew when I went. So if you have made this much from that place by mostly being alone or with my family, then you can get by the comments which come from people. For sure, as Kamani said, it's very exhausting. It is very exhausting. At there is one point you just don't want to talk to anyone, but it's okay to take a step back sometimes. Sometimes it's just okay to just take a step back and not wanting to do anything. But just remember that when you take a step back, you just take a step back to go forward. You're not going back all the time. It's just not happening because you've made it from wherever you are. So you will be something. And like, no one needs to tell you what you're going to be. You are going to be something you want to be.
Thanks, Priyana. The next question will be for Rico. How has your work as an activist, if it has, changed since 2016? And I'm presuming this is referencing the beginning of the Trump administration.
Yeah, thank you for that question. The Trump administration gave way to the beginning, I believe, of a revolution of young people that otherwise hadn't been fueled wouldn't have been fueled because of the rhetoric that was coming out of that administration. So the way that it's changed for me and what I've seen is that the need for change hasn't gone away. What do I mean by that is 5 years ago, I was still involved in anti-racism work. However, 5 years ago, anti-racism work wasn't cool. It wasn't the thing. It wasn't sort of what everyone wanted to do, right? And so we go back to last year, and out of a sudden, the entire world just began talking about anti-racism work. And that was because of the labor of all of the community organizers and the activists that have put that conversation there for everyone to talk about. So the need for change hasn't gone away. However, the tactics have changed. So now social media is being used as one of the most useful tools to get across people. And also directly organizing on the ground has changed as well. And I'll give a very perfect example. A candidate out of New York, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, in 2016, I believe, was running against an individual with 20 years of experience, right? And so this community that she was a part of was not heard. And what did she do? She had the audacity to knock on the door of every door she could. And she did relational organizing. And so I think relational organizing just has been amplified in a way where now people feel like, wow, you look like me, you represent me, you are me, you know what I'm going through. And so that, I think, fuels people to want to invoke change in their school boards, their city councils, their governments, and at the federal level. And so I think is the tactics have changed, but the work remains the same.
Thanks, Rico. Looks like we actually just got a follow-up question for you. How has Daca changed your life?
For me, the way that it has changed my life, it's allowed me to have this career that I have. It's allowed me to do to perform basic necessities like driving a car, owning a home, right? These are basic necessities. But also when I also include that my parents also taught me that even with my parents coming into the country as undocumented people, they told me even with our wings cut off, they still taught me how to fly, with or without Daca. And so while yes, Daca is a temporary solution, to me, it has been a blessing, but it's also only a temporary solution. And I like to describe it as sort of those things that babies suck on, and they know it's not the real bottle, but they're like, it'll serve for the moment. And for me, I'm looking for the whole bottle of milk. I don't want the temporary piece, right? And so for me, I acknowledge the blessings, but I also acknowledge that there should be more.
Thank you, Rico. So our next question will be for Dr. Sophia Khan. What can we do to be an ally when we learn that someone is an immigrant or is undocumented or on a visa or working towards citizenship?
Okay, that's a great question. And that was the foundation of one of the piece of our work, is we realize that a lot of people who don't understand the struggles of people like Priyana, people like Rico, they don't understand their struggles because they do not know people from maybe these categories. So developing or encouraging people to remember to be human beings before they're going to be dividing themselves into a category. Am I white? Am I citizen? Am I documented? Can you just forget that for a minute and raise yourself above that division and actually consider yourself just a human being? And the next person, don't look at their skin color. I always remind people, when I did my medical school training, I wasn't told to treat the Black person like this, the white person like this, treat humans like this, For a minute, just be a human being and try to get to know people. I think very important thing to do is to seek out people once they have a mindset that I'm open to it. I want to change. You have to open your heart and seek. You have to put in an effort. Get to know someone who's on the Daca. Get to know a student who's on a student visa. Get to know a refugee. Get to know them. Share your stories. And then you will know that all these prejudices, they kind of crumble up and go away. And you start supporting policies that are more humanitarian. And all history. It's very important for people who themselves are not student. Go back into your history. Ask your parents, ask your grandparents. I'm not a Native American. How did we end up here? Listen to your own family story. That might connect you very fast with these people. So if you're really open to it, you think you're that kind of a person, put in some effort, get to know some people, conversations, open up hearts. Very important.
Thank you, Sophia. So the next question will be for Esther. Do you think the path forward to battle discrimination is to change policies or to change people's minds first?
I think the response to that wonderful question lies in what our family just spoke of. I think that policy is often made in response to one person or various people's impressions, own personal feelings. Often it's made in fear. And what are we afraid of? What is so scary about X, Y, or Z? So I think that, Rico, you said it, relational organizing. When you bring it up close, you can't turn away from it, right? Because this otherness that they've instilled by making these benefits and privileges exclusive to some, but not to others. Why is that the case? Why is that sustained? Why is it made so hard to transition out of? Oh, because some people have a lot to lose. And you don't want people operating on the same level, because that would be scary, right? So I think that relationships are everything. And oftentimes when you attend spaces just as this one that has been put together with so much love and so much care, you walk away knowing the names, knowing the stories, knowing the tenor of the voice of a person that just touched your life, whether it was an hour, 15 minutes, whatever it was. But I can speak personally, there's no walking away from this without feeling warmth in my soul, but also walking away with signature statements in my head and the faces and the voices of these beautiful folk in my person. So I would almost dare anybody, open yourself up, and I dare you not to feel something. because there is no way you wouldn't. Like, educate yourself as to why these policies were made, who made them, what were they gaining from it, and what were they so afraid of. So.
Thank you. Okay, Kamani, we actually have 2 questions for you. So what is something you wished white people understood better about the immigrant experience?
So one thing I struggled with coming back, like coming to United States, I think if white people would understand, there's like different kind of accents, like in speaking, not assuming that, oh, this is the standard word that you use, and this is the standard phrase that you use in this sentence. So if white people would have been educated saying like, oh, your English is not only the English that people would speak in the whole universe, there's another different slangs. That is something I struggle because I speak totally different English in India. It's a British and the words we use is totally different, and it was hard for me to like. I would say something and I didn't mean in that way, but they would get offended because that is not the right word that should be used in here. So white people acknowledging their like English, saying like, oh, this is a person who's coming from an immigrant, so probably they're meaning to offend you. That is something I would wish. And as for all white people, whoever is watching on the live, to make sure that you're not like hurting somebody because of their accent.
Thank you. And this is the second question that just came through. I came out to my parents 3 years ago, and I still get flashbacks of all the ways my family reacted. Do you think there are ways to cope with this? Or I guess they're looking for recommendations for how to cope.
Coming out, there's something which a brown and like South Asian people would never understand, of creating boundaries mentally. Like, one thing I'm still struggling with, and I honestly don't have the answers, and I'm like creating boundaries with my parents, when to talk and what are we talking about whenever we are talking, and making your boundaries with your parents, saying like, oh, this time I'm not going to talk anything about my coming out situation, or like anything about my life. And in terms of coping up with the flashbacks, I think having a peer support, like finding a peer support group within your community, wherever you're living in, like signing up, and like that's where you could go and talk. Like, I'm pretty sure wherever the region you're living in, they'll have some LGBTQ center, and they would provide some peer support group, talking out and seeking some therapist help. That would also help. So those are the kind of things I would cope up with. Or the last thing I would do is like writing it down, just writing it down on everything on the paper, and I'm like, tear it off and just dump it. That's what I do.
Thank you, Kamani. So I'm going to go into some group questions. And so anyone who feels called to respond, please just jump in. Privilege is currency. What would be one suggestion for those of us with the privilege of citizenship to use that currency to support immigrants, especially the undocumented?
I can say a few words on that. We have to remember that we need to pressurize our elected officials to stand up for what we believe in. So there is always advocacy going on from all these people, like students and the Daca recipients and stuff, where you can reach out to their websites and see what are they advocating at a certain point. And it's very simple. If you've never done it before, all you need to do is pull up the list of your elected officials, call them and say, this is the policy I support and I voted for you. And have a group of like-minded people, just shower them with these phone calls, and it actually makes a difference. As advocates, we know that they do keep track of what were the topics of the phone calls that came and what do their constituents want them to do, and it does make a difference in what policies they sign up for. And if you know of a policy supportive of your whatever group you're supporting, make sure you are educated and spread the word and get as many elected officials to sign on that bill as much as you can do. So I think there's a lot that citizens can do from that perspective. That's my opinion.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that one?
I can do just a quick overview of that. Whoever asked that question, I want to make sure that I look directly into the camera because, this pandemic has not allowed us to be in person, but if I could give anything, I want to make sure that I'm looking at you and I'm talking to you about this. Oftentimes we don't ask ourselves, and by we, I mean people who have the ability to vote, aren't asking themselves, what is our vote worth? What do you want to come out of your vote? And when people ask me, how can I support you? My response is usually, I want you to make my struggle a part of your struggle. And so I want you to live as if your life is in fear of being deported. I want you to live as if your family's ability to remain in this country is not guaranteed. And when you have that feeling, and when you are able to feel the stinging darts of what it feels to be an undocumented immigrant, then you will be able to cast your vote in the way that supports all immigrants, not just undocumented people, but people with visas. And if you know someone that is in that situation, get to know them and know exactly how their life differs from you. Because when we're able to understand how our lives differ, we're able to push for a world in which those individuals can be a part of that privilege and be a part of that world, right? Thank you for that question, though. Great question.
Thanks, Rico. Did anyone else want to jump in on that one before?
Geneva, if I could just add something to that.
Yeah.
Rico, thank you so much. That was so powerful. Again, it's the golden rule, right? Put yourself in those shoes, understand and try to see how their life is, and then look at the ways that you can help. Look at the ways that your privilege maybe has blinded you to not even understand the situation that is going on in their lives. And using the golden rule, which is the unifying principle that we all have heard or believed at some point or another, we see that we will be able to take action in that and help our communities that are affected by this. So thank you for that, Rico. That was super powerful.
Thanks, Felipe. Any other comments on that question before I move on? Okay. Priyana, how has being so far away from your family as a young person affected you, especially with the added stress of being a student and having this 5-year limitation?
For sure, being mature at a very young age, like 14 or 15, I had to go around searching for apartments in New Delhi, which could fit my dad's budget. So it was, I was doing adult things probably from when I was 14 or 15 years old, thinking about what I'm going to eat, how I'm going to pay the bills of the training and electricity, rent, whatever. I was also lucky to come across a lot of good people, very generous people, like my the person who owned the apartment. He was really nice. And then my coach there in Delhi, he was very generous because he let me attend the academy at a lower cost because he understood where I was coming from, and I was the only person who was in that kind of a situation because other people had parents supporting, and they lived in Delhi and stuff most of the time. Yeah, I feel like I think a bit older, I think so, than my actual age. Sometimes if people call me a bit old, even my parents call me very sometimes old, because like I always think in the future because it's so much stress. Because for example, I'm graduating in May, and then I have to figure out some stuff about what I'm going to do next and everything. It's so stressful. And so probably just thinking about the future and planning, like setting goals. Like I said, when I was 14, like, yeah, college scholarship, tennis, degree, whatever after. So probably planning things in life is something I've learned, and managing things when I get into trouble also I've developed something like that, because there's no one looking out for you. My parents live 7,000 kilometers away from me, so they won't come running when I get hurt or something. So probably just figuring that out. That's what, yeah.
Thanks, Priyana. Kamani, how, as a queer person who sometimes feels the weight of that, how can I be a better ally to those within the LGBTQ plus community who are immigrants and are also dealing with this added weight?
Thank you so much, whoever asked this question. I personally tell to people most of the time, ally is not a noun, it's a verb that's ongoing. It's like, oh, I'm an ally to LGBTQ person. It's not just a noun, it's an ongoing process that you have to show up to the ongoing issues or like process that is going on within LGBTQ community, showing up and being there for the LGBTQ community and not taking up the spaces, giving the spaces to the marginalized community, and not taking up the experiences of them and projecting that you have evolved a lot. It is something we as a marginalized community educated you to be evolved as a person in society, and make sure you're always crediting your always crediting LGBTQ people if the work that has been done by them. So it's like an ongoing list. I could keep going on and on if how could be a better ally. It's something I would say. It's like not just saying I'm an ally. It's a work that you need to keep doing it and acknowledging your privileges, where to speak, when to speak, how to speak, and where you give the spaces for all these LGBTQ people.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to another group question now. When can we, or sorry, I think this is supposed to be, what can we do to help change or evolve the mentality, views of those that believe that being an immigrant is a chosen crime, especially in how the media portrays us?
I can speak to that a bit. First of all, media, there is no common place. Media will always keep on blaming people. Yeah, there's no one's good according to media. Okay, that's the thing. First of all, if we are talking about media, we have to be careful about what kind of sources we choose. And although we might not like some sources, we have to make sure we look at them in order to think about what other people are thinking, and then take action, because action without research is just hollow, doesn't make sense, it's not going anywhere. You have to take time to analyze about what things are going on. You might think that, oh, I need to do something, oh, I need to do this, but stop and actually look at what actually needs to be done, then only go and do it through a process. And for sure, like the notion of crime, I personally didn't come from India for fun. So like I didn't come here just because to explore options of education. I had to come here because it was the only way out for me. From where I'm from, Guwahati, it's a very, very small place in India. Sometimes we get forgotten. The Northeast India gets forgotten in India. So that was the only way out. And I know so many people like myself who come here because there are opportunities here for us. But then we don't, for example, we cannot go into a store and just go apply for a job just because we need some extra income. There is curricular practical training, there is optional practical training, there is H1B1 visa that we need to apply for with a fee without a guarantee of getting the authorization. So we are bounded by, even if we like are successful in coming here, we are bounded by these rules, these boundaries, and we cannot like get free of them. So every immigrant or person associated with migrant, immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker community, we are bounded by these things, and we're not having fun. We are kind of like trapped. We're just trying to get our way out of here, do something better. So that's the thing. Yeah.
If
Thanks.
I may. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask if anyone else wanted to jump in. So go ahead.
Thank you, Geneva. Going with what Priyana just said, there's these delineations, right? And some of them are transparent, others are just big, huge roadblocks. And when it comes down to it, you won't know what they are until you're in the thick of it. There's so much to be said about putting yourself out there and waiting, right? You put yourself just pay to play, it's not a game. This is not a game. This is your entire body waiting with bated breath. Rico said it as well. It's like the pacifier. No, we want the whole bottle, man. And we're just getting this little itty bitty bit. And how do you sustain yourself when you're just like short breaths, right? Short breaths for this very limited a time. And that fight or flight mode, the what that stress does to your body, but not just your body, your parents' body, your siblings' body, your beloved's body, everybody that loves you, and they're watching you go through this. And it doesn't matter what time or accrued investment in this whiteness that you've been a part of. It doesn't accrue and equal to, well, you've done this time or you've invested this much, you're going to get X. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. And that's part of the frustrating thing. And, there's a lot of nuances. For example, the act of citizenship and going back to the conversation about, what do we want our siblings who have that citizenship? Also, beloved, recognize how did you come about that citizenship? Did you come into this world and it was already yours? Did you go through a process and then it was earned? What is the access to those pathways? How much time went into play? What had to be sacrificed or invested for said thing, right? It's not a given, it is a lot of putting forth with the hope and the faith that it may someday pay off. You have the journey, you have that education, right? Those light and dark funds of knowledge, because you can't have the light without the dark. They're one and the same. So how do you continue moving forward? Because it's so much bigger than us, right? Because we're in this together. We come from all these different walks of life and we find ourselves in this very spot, in this very moment in time. And we're trying to have a conversation with people that have, many blessings to you for joining us today. And so just keeping these conversations going is very important. And when it comes to chosen crime, it's considered a crime because a law deems it so. So let's look at the history of laws, who created them, as a result of what was considered unlawful 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago. Like, look back at what is allowed, why it is created as such, and why this and not that. So just problematize these rhetorics of good and bad. There's so much more. And it's, it is on all of us to learn about it and educate ourselves, because it impacts all of us, all our communities.
Did anyone else want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, can I say a few words?
Yeah.
So dealing with the refugee community and now recently also getting involved with the asylum seekers, one thing I've noticed, because educating the community is part of our mission, is people don't even understand the differences between how people make it to this country, and calling everybody coming in here and it's a crime. Here's Priyana came legal route. She came while she got permission from the US government to come here for 5 years. There's no crime there, no illegality there. Even in little kids, like Rico's case, if he was a child and his parents were getting away from poverty or whatever, and they came through and they settled in this country and have been working hard, giving back, people don't understand even the differences between how people come. And so educating them in those, we've done multiple panels and trying to educate people how everybody makes it here, what is the process. And the fear part that Esther talked about, if people go down the list, what is their fear? Okay, do you think these people are going to do crime? Look at the statistics. The people who come into this country, the amount of crime they do is less than 0.01% maybe, even if that exists. So no, you're wrong. Where are you getting these numbers from? These are the real numbers. They take away my job. Show me. They take the jobs that nobody. It's mostly American people who are gone through the disability programs and, oh, I just have a little depression. I do disability exams for the past 10 years. Trust me. All I tell them is, why didn't you reassess his case and got him off the list because he has nothing wrong with him and you've been paying him for 10 years. So these people are not dependent.
Sophia, I think your connection might be a little unstable. Is she freezing for everyone else? Yeah. Sophia, are you there?
While we're waiting for Sophia, I wanted to also address that, there are so many different situations. It's such a huge story that it's so different from everyone. I was also an international student and came with an F1 visa, which is a student visa. And then, you come to this country, you get all this like studying done after like lots of money paid, right, for your visa and for, you have to prove to the university, even if you have a scholarship, you have to prove to the university that you have enough funds to like pay for your tuition and everything for the 4 years that you're going to be there. It's quite a lot. But then think about the case of a child that was brought to the country by their parents. In this case, they came through the border without without a visa or anything like that. They come here undocumented. This kid had no idea that this happened. They don't know anything about their country, where they're actually from, and then they have to live in this country where they're not really welcomed, and they don't have any possibilities of like getting a job or even going to school in so many states. So there's a lot of different stories that come with immigration, and all of them are valid, right? But I mean, there's I don't even know where to start. There's like so much to it, right? So it's important to see that there's so many different variants and variables, and more likely than not, for the people that are listening, at least one person that has gone through this process, is going through the process, or is hoping to hopefully go through this process at some point. And they might not say because they're afraid. They're scared of being judged, for people to change the way that they behave around them or what they think of them. And so it's scary for a lot of people, especially undocumented immigrants. How, like, are they going to report me to ICE? Am I going to get deported or something like that? So more likely than not, someone that is in this issue. And so it's important to put yourself in those shoes and see how can you help with this as much as you can.
Thanks, Felipe. Sophia, do we have you back now? No. Look. Oh, there she is. I think she's moving locations. Okay. Did anyone else want to add anything to that question? No? Okay. Sophia, you just want to make sure. I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add because you froze a little bit earlier.
Oh, it's okay. I think it was covered. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, great. Let's see here. Let's see. For Those of us who are not an immigrant and have been very sheltered from that world, how can we be a better ally to those who are? Does anyone want to take that?
I can
Okay.
on that. So allyship is good, but there's another thing called being an accomplice. For sure, that is associated with criminal activity, but I'm not talking about accomplice as in the form of criminal activity. As Kamani said, leave space for the minority community, marginalized community. So when you're talking about working for people like us, you have to let us take the lead. You have to listen to us. First, you listen to us, then you work according to what is good for us. Because when I say us, right, on this call, there's so many identities. We're dealing with immigration, but with different forms. So there's no like working as a whole. You can have a institution or an organization like KC for refugees, Dr. Sophia's organization, but then you also have to make sure you work for those segments in immigration and be an accomplice. You can be an ally and not do anything, and you'll still be an ally. You'll be aware about the issue, but be an accomplice. Listen to us, then go ahead and work. Search organizations where you're situated. Just go to Instagram, go to the location feature. You will just get it. It's just there. So that's the thing. Just listen. For listening is a skill that a lot of us struggle with. We talk, yeah, we're talking, but listening is something we need to work on, because we get to know about so many stuff when we actively listen. What I'm talking about actively listen is open mind. You're not thinking about what you're going to say next when you're actually listening to the person. You're just listening to the person that moment without even thinking anything. So as people, we need to work on that. And we also need to work on knowing the platinum rule. We know the golden rule. Treat people like you wanted to be treated, but the platinum rule is treat people like they wanted to be treated. There is a difference. Then only there will be equity. Equality, fine. But for equity to happen, we have to treat people like they want to, because we're different. We're different as a human being. We're just different. So, just work on that. I guess that's what. Yeah.
I'd like to add to this one as well. Oftentimes when we're stuck in the same routine, we go to a restaurant, we order French fries or hamburger. It's oftentimes the same thing. So here's my first piece of advice to whoever asked that question. If you've been sheltered from this conversation, from even people who are immigrants, go to a Venezuelan restaurant in your area. Go to an Indian restaurant in your area. Go to an Ethiopian restaurant, an authentic Mexican food in your area. Make sure they're authentic too. The reason why I say that is because when you're able to unlock a whole new flavor of food, you'll be able to understand the culture. When you're able to understand the culture, you'll be able to understand the language. When you're able to understand the language, you'll then understand why when I say Rico Ocampo, why that's so important to me rather than Rico Ocampo, right? And so when you're able to understand my name, you're able to understand me. And so there's multiple layers behind what you call allyship. For me, for me, it shows up in many ways, but I didn't say go to a restaurant as a joke. I literally mean go to a restaurant of a different nation, and if you don't know what you're gonna order, just go for it. That's the whole purpose of meeting people who are different than you. If you don't know who they are, if they like the same thing, that's the whole point. Try to figure out what you do like, and then from then on, work your way up into the culture, the language, the wardrobe, the attire, the music, and then ensure that the names of those immigrants that you consider friends that their names are being pronounced correctly, because that goes back to their ancestry. And so that is my advice to you, whoever asked that question.
I would also add something to Rico and Priyana. As an artist and an artist who do art for the advocacy also, art as a weapon. So I hate saying this, but also it's out there. How people treat art is not equally as a full-time job that you do for a 9 to 5. Often at times they think that, oh, art is just free. They could just do it for free. I personally have people in Washington, D.C. Who reached out to me to just do it for free because I'm up and coming person, or because there's like white drag queens are gatekeeping every locations and the platforms. It is so hard for me to get the access to even do an event for my people in DC. So whoever this question asks, like in your local place, like find out, is there any black or brown, like uh, LGBTQ artist? It doesn't have to be drag. It can be an artist who paints, an artist who does storytelling, drag, performance. There's so many kinds of art forms you could support. You like hire them. Don't hire them just because you wanted to have an inclusivity, because tokenizing, again, there's a whole lot of conversations that we can talk about tokenizing black and brown people. So support artists, also support your local businesses who are POC and everybody.
Thank you. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add to that question? Okay, well, we are at about 4:30 Eastern time right now, so I think that we're about at that point to wrap it up. We did have a request for any additional resources for those looking for more information about immigrant justice and immigrant stories. So if any of you have resources you can recommend, if you can maybe email those to me and I will get them posted to the YouTube channel, and maybe, I don't know if Dom might be able to put them on the Start the Wave resource page. So
absolutely. So I couldn't find my unmute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll get those to you. So, great. So yeah, so if you guys can send those to me, that would be great. I just want to thank you all so much for your time and for sharing your stories. I'm really humbled to be in this space with all of you today, and really, really grateful for your willingness to do this panel. And just thank you to everyone who tuned in on YouTube and who will continue to watch this in the coming weeks. And just to our co-sponsors, Start the Wave and URI North America, and to Priyana for really sort of being the hub that facilitated this entire conversation. You really the reason we're all here. So very grateful. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Priyana or Dom or Felipe?
Nothing much. I feel like thanks for agreeing to do this. It's important for people to know that, immigration is just not immigration. It's a lot more than that. So yeah, I mean, this was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I just want to say a huge thank you to each and every person here today. It was one of the most inspiring conversations, and I have deep gratitude. Priyana, you're doing amazing work, and it's just such an honor to be here. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for joining us.